Welcome to Steps Forward with Ricky, a weekly walking podcast designed to help you take steps forward in your life and your day.
Today is April 30th, 2018, which is also the day I commit to a life without weed. To be honest, I'm ashamed that something so stupid and so harmless like smoking pot is a thing that I feel powerless around. Ever since I can remember, though, I've used it to numb the loneliness and then binge eat after to fill myself back up. But here we go again, back in the ring for the 100th time. And I'm going to fight like hell to get rid of this. And maybe one day, when I'm finally clean, free, I'll have the courage to share my truth with the world. For now, though, I'm just working on not being so scared of it in the first place. All right, that's it for now. Let's do this. I wrote that in 2018. One of my clients asked me the other day if I had tried to stop a lot before, or if I've tried to make this change before. And I was like, let me read something to you. And this is so important because I didn't wake up one day and change my life. I did wake up one day and change my life, but I woke up a lot of other fucking days wanting to change my life. And whether you're trying to fix your life and walk away from weed or whatever it is in your life that you're doing, it's just like, it's not this like, it really truly is a journey. Like I have been on a journey forever and we're always on a journey forever. But when I read something like that, it's kind of amazing actually, because, okay, so it's actually kind of amazing because holy fucking shit. We think that our greatest shame is the worst thing in our lives. But like my addiction to marijuana has given me the greatest gifts. And I remember just like being so in it and just feeling so stuck. And I always just sort of thought like I could only talk about my mom's loss, or like that was like my purpose, or that was this, or that was that. And I think like just reading that is just such a reminder to you, hopefully, and to me that it's like sometimes our greatest fucking pain becomes the greatest gift, not just for ourselves, for other people. And it's so powerful because it reminds me that like even the things I'm experiencing right now, like in a year from now, I'll look back and that will be part of the journey. Things that I never thought I'd ever be able to do or have, right? Like didn't think I'd be able to create a live coaching program. Didn't think I'd ever have a podcast in the top 100. Like we think we're stuck. We think we can't. We think we won't. And that thinking in itself is what keeps us from it. But I'm almost 1 year clean. Speaking of 1 year, this is 1 year of the podcast. So I celebrate 1 year, almost 1 year clean. I celebrate 1 year of the podcast. I celebrate every fucking thing that I've done from the day I sat in this studio for the first time to right now, because I've done a lot. And I think sometimes when it comes to change, we zoom in, right? We're like, bad month, bad week, nothing's changing. I haven't gotten this client, or I didn't make this much money this month, or I didn't, I gained 2 pounds, or I fell off track, or, no one's listening to my podcast. Like, and then you zoom out. If you zoom out on your journey and you look at the big picture of your journey, growth is over time. My podcast had 363 downloads for the first 3 months. Literally. And I fucking showed up happier and more excited than you would have thought that I had a top 100 podcasts. I was like, yeah, this is the coolest thing ever. Like I marketed it because I loved it and I believed in it, and I fucking knew. I just knew. I knew one day the journey would unfold. And I would look back at my first episode the same day, the same way I look back at what I wrote in 2018. And it will be this clue that this universe had been guiding me the whole time. And I will look back and I'll be like, yes. And today is the day I look back and I'm like, fuck yeah, like what? This is incredible. And it's the longest thing I've ever done. Like I was a life coach, I did Break the Way, did all that stuff. But this is different. I have literally I've showed up every single week. I mean, there's only 2 episodes that I haven't done. which is great. And, the universe it's really crazy. It really does guide you. It does leave you little clues. Like, I think this podcast came into my life, or I created it because my life was about to be like ripped apart. Like, what? I named a podcast Steps Forward. And literally a month later, after starting it, like, walked away from me. My relationship ended. Like, how many steps forward have I taken? How many have you taken? Maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a year. Who are you now? Have you evolved? Have you changed? Zoom out for a minute. What have you changed? It's okay if you haven't changed a million things, but read something you wrote a year ago. Do you still feel that way? Because we have to zoom out on the journey to understand the journey. Because when you get so caught up in all the details in the middle of all of it, you're like, nothing's really changing, right? But if I had paid attention and I was like, oh, the podcast isn't growing, then like I would have just been in that energy. But I was just like, the podcast will grow as long as I show up. As long as you show up to your life, things will happen for it. I just was thinking, like, do you ever look back at your year, or like you're just like, what happened this year? I like to do things from like my birthday to my next birthday, or August 1st is when I started the podcast. Now it's August 1st, when you'll be listening to this. Like, what has happened during this last year? It's so wild to me. And you can always change your life. Like, I had this human design reader like a couple of years ago, and I remember she said to me, she's like, you're about to have like a spiritual awakening. And I was like, all right, like what? She's like, your whole life's about to like be like fucked up. I was like, what? She's like, everything that's not aligned for you is going to be gone. Everything. And I was like, when? She's like, I don't know when, but like in the next year and a half. She was absolutely correct about that. The universe pushed everything out of my life that wasn't right. Smoking, Michigan, my relationship, certain clients. I mean, literally everything. And I think it's because I took a couple actions to allow the door to open. And so you don't have to make every decision in your life, but when you make a decision and you trust that decision, you have to also believe that the universe is going to help you make other decisions. And I just feel so grateful to be here. I love listening to old podcast episodes. Funny, like interesting, when I listen to my podcast episodes, I was always speaking from the past, like sharing old stories. And I realized why. For the first 10 episodes, I was always sharing from the past because my present was way too painful to talk about. I couldn't talk about how I was getting high all day because I was still getting high. I couldn't talk about how my relationship wasn't right because I was still in it. And that was a big turning point for me. Like when I finally told the truth, my podcast changed. I didn't have to speak from the past anymore. I could speak from my present life because my present life was what was happening and it was so honest. So if you feel terrified to talk about your present and you keep going to the past, why? Are you embodying the things that you believe? Because I know for me, like I had to circle back and go to these old stories because my present story was too painful. So then I had to write a new one. And I think that's what this podcast has done. It's allowed me to write a new one. And you guys have allowed me to write a new one because without you, this podcast doesn't grow. So thank you for accepting me for who I am and for embracing who I am and for letting me be who I am and allowing me to do that. And I hope that this podcast helps you become a little more of yourself and not so fucking scared of your truth. So I'm going to keep it short today because I'm thankful to be here. I don't really have a lot to say right now, to be honest with you. And I think that's a perfect way to end this episode because it's authentic and it's real and it's just me. And this is how I started the podcast. And so happy 1 year to all of us. We're just getting started. Thank you for taking these steps with me. I honestly, I'm so grateful. And I love walking this path with you. So thank you. I love you and I appreciate you and happy 1 year.